Ah, hola a todos, me encantaría hablar con vosotros en español, pero no lo puedo. Entonces que aquí se termina mi español y empieza el inglés. So I'm Julia Machado. I was so much well presented. I'll be talking to you about money, so in a different sense, I guess, of the former presentation. Oh, just 1 second. I have to find this little guy here. Yeah. I'll start talking about myself just to present me. As they said, I've been coding since I was a little child. Both my parents worked in tech back then. Not exactly the 80s, 88, right?
Cuando
I'm not
hiciste
that old.
el reloj.
Oh, sorry, what's happening? Oh, okay. So coding has been a theme in my life. There's a little secret. I'm also a lawyer, but that's something that I normally don't share. I'm sharing with you because I'll be talking about licenses a little bit. And yeah, I'm the founder of WebCrumbs. WebCrumbs is building a plugin ecosystem for the JavaScript community. We are building a way to package little apps that you can embed in other apps in the final website theme. We already have the front-end AI. It's free. It's online. You don't need login to check it out. And just to make it fun, we added some badges that you can put in, I don't know, your GitHub profile if you want, and also to see how our front-end AI works. But okay, open source came a very long way, right? Here you can see 1990. I will read that for you. When you program open source, you are programming communism. A reminder from your friends at Microsoft, right? That was 1990. And some years later, 2018, and we have Microsoft buying GitHub for 7.5 billion under Satya Nadella. So a lot of things changed, right? Another big acquisition in this area, IBM acquired Red Hat for 34 billion. So huge M&A as well. If you talk a little bit outside of the M&A scenario, you can see large companies like Google and Apple using open source strategies as part of their business, like Google open sourced Android, and Apple even being known as closed and known for proprietary software, open source Swift. But if you are an entrepreneur working in an open source project or company, you'll have these eyes of investors asking you, okay, so open source, will you guys make money? Right? That's the first question. And this is in part because of a linguistic aspect of it. Not all, but in part it is. Free in English. In Spanish, it wouldn't be a problem, but in English, free can mean freedom, and it can also mean gratis, right, in Spanish. But usually the open source, the freedom in open source that we talk to about is the freedom as in free, is the free as in freedom, not as free as in beer. And just to get all of the doubts out of the table, yes, companies somehow related to open source can make money. I brought here some very nice examples, like Databricks, not IPO'd yet, 43 billion valuation, 1.6 billion revenue. We have MongoDB, IPO in 2017, 18 billion valuation, 1.7 billion revenue. This is annual revenue. Elastic, 11 billion valuation, 1.2 billion revenue. GitLab, IPO'd in 21, 8.5 billion in valuation, 600 million in revenue. Confluent, also IPO in 21, with valuation of 7.7 billion and 800 million in revenue. Finally, we have also Automatic, the company that's behind WordPress. They are a private company yet, but the latest data shows that they have around 7.5 billion valuation and more than 1 billion in revenue. Okay, so now our investor says, okay, open source can make money, but how, right? Exactly how? And I will use some of these companies that we've been talking to explore some of the business models that they use. I'll start talking about the Git, the original Git created by Linus, and that is not the same as GitHub nor GitLab. Git is under GNU General Public License, which means it is a permissive license. It means it can be used freely, even for commercial purpose. And that's a little bit of what GitLab and GitHub did, even though they were not the creators of Git. They used Git, and based on this open source, they capitalize on it. GitLab maintains one part of the software as a community version, and that part is open source, and they also have an enterprise edition that is not open source and that they sell, and that's where they have their revenue. If you look at GitHub, you see, well, first, they are not open source, not open core. They do not release their own code. What they do is they base their business model on Git and add tiers and a lot of add-ons, a lot of additional services that are useful for us as users, like security, dependables, even GitHub Copilot. And for each and every of these add-ons, there is usually a cost involved. Okay, so we mentioned add-ons, tiers. Now let's talk about Red Hat again, right? Red Hat created a Linux version, and this version is free. You can download and use individually. And how do they make money? Through subscription. It happens that CTOs around the world are preferring, in a way, open source software. This is because you don't have vendor lock-in, you do have a large community, it can make development faster. So there are lots of advantages of using open source, but there are still some disadvantages for a large company. And one of them is you do not have a company, usually, to complain when something goes wrong, or you do not have support. So adding support to an open source software is another business model that is possible. Even the Linux Foundation, right? The way they make money is through education. They have a lot of programs, certifications, so also a way to fund the open source company. Now let's talk about a trend, I would say. You may remember some years ago, we used to download software or buy disks, CDs, install it. So distribution of software then was really something or physical or transmitted through internet. That's not the case anymore for most services. The trend is that services are each time more provided through a server. So it's a software as a service provided through a server. It means you not get the full code of the software you are benefiting from, you get only the service. And that's where MongoDB, for instance, Thrive, they do have a community version that you can host in your computer or wherever you want. But they also have their own cloud. And it's very convenient. You already love the product usually, and you tend to go with them with other services that they provide you. And it's the same for Elastic. Elastic has a cloud version as well. And Elastic has a nice story. So 2021, Elastic says, Amazon, this is not okay. Basically, they were under a license then that didn't have the nuance of not allowing companies to copy and use the code without contributing back to the community, specifically when it was server-side, because of this difference between distributing or keeping it on the server side. So not only Elastic, but also MongoDB, they developed a different kind of license, a server-side license. And later, actually a few months ago, Elastic changed to an open source initiative approved license, which is the AGPL. There is something very interesting in this license. First, they do not prevent any company, be it AWS or other, to use their software for commercial gains. That's not the purpose of any open source license. Usually, that's within the permissions. What they do, though, is that they require that if you do any modification to the code, then you also have to disclose it. You also have to make it public under the same licenses. So it becomes something important for the negotiations between the companies, right? Similarly, but a little bit older, I would say, Automatic and just a comment before I continue. The Elasticsearch, as well as the Automatic WordPress license I'm talking now, they are called copyleft. They are called copyleft because if you copy, then you have to keep it open under the same license, and also you have to disclose your code. So WordPress has something similar. It's a copyleft license, it's GPL. And it's interesting because they have a lot of lawsuits against competitors that try to copy in some way WordPress. And basically, they're not saying you cannot use it, you cannot copy. They're saying if you do, you have to also make your source code available. So right now I talk about good ideas, like good business models. There are also some cautions, I would say. When Sun, in 2010, Sun had the rights over Java, MySQL, and OpenOffice. And Sun was acquired by Oracle. Oracle is known as being very protective and closed source, I would say. And it was there was concern in the community that Oracle could close the source of these programming languages I mentioned. So what happened was forks. So MySQL was forked as MariaDB, OpenOffice was forked as LibreOffice, and Oracle now has a lawsuit against Google to forbid them to use Java in their Android apps. But just a common a comment here is that it is not impossible to change licenses. You've seen, for instance, that Elastic changed, but it did in a very transparent way, explaining to the community why they're doing that. But it's super important to keep this transparency with the community. Just to finish up, I also mentioned Apple with Swift and Google with Android. The reason they do that is pretty obvious for us, right? They are building a platform. If they attract developers to develop apps in this platform, they are increasing the value of the platform itself by attracting more users. Users will attract more developers, and that's what investors call a flywheel. And finally, I think there is another strategy in open source, I would say. I call it from the makers of. You can see, for instance, I think the story of Confluent is very interesting. They were all employees of LinkedIn when they developed Kafka, Apache Kafka. And if you think of it, it was made inside LinkedIn as an open source. So LinkedIn did not have any prerogative to prohibit other people to use it or even profit from the open source, right? So basically, anyone could create, theoretically, Confluent. But of course, the creators of the open source Kafka would have a better position to do that, right? And that's similar to Databricks. Databricks was earlier also Apache Sparks. So this is to say that making an open source also put you in a better position to later have a company around that concept. Super short, my presentation, I think. I do have a full article if you want. It was recently published at opensource.net. There, I not only tell all the stories a little bit more in detail, but I also put some tips, I would say, in the last part for founders. And yeah, here is the full link in the QR code. And that's it, people. Me gustó muchísimo hablar con vosotros y que conversemos, ¿no? Tengo ahí mis contactos, incluso mi Calendly. Normalmente I speak Fridays with developers, so feel free to schedule some time there. And if you want, here is, again, the badges that we did for Nerdeala, if you want to use it in your GitHub profile or anywhere. Okay, that's it.
Aplauso. Bueno. Oh. No, tuyo.
Okay.
Yours. Bueno, preguntas para Julia? Some questions? You? Yes. ¿Para qué quieres sacar la foto? Not a problem.
Welcome.
How do they filter or notice that the people is using their code in other place without contributing?
How do you know if someone is using your code without contributing?
Yeah.
You cannot have total control of it. Let's say if you have a GitHub repository and someone forks it, you will know about it. But it's part of the open source license to not have this full control. So anyone can copy and use it, basically. Yeah, I'd say. Huh? Like Reddit?
Like Redis.
Oh, Redis, yes.
Redis.
Yeah. Oh, Reddit.
Reddit. Okay, Reddit.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, you don't have control over once it's
Yeah.
publicly available,
Yeah.
you lose control.
You can try, like at Webcrums, we have some metrics that we like to track, only to see how it's going. For instance, we track if there are people talking about us on Stack Overflow, because it means they're using it. You can see on GitHub, you can search for Webcrums, and you see whoever has a public repository that is using. We have like, I don't know, 100 forks. I don't know, not all of that, but we do have some forks, so we know these people have a copy of it at least. But yeah, the purpose is to spread, actually. We are happy if more people have the code. Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. One more question?
I guess everyone wants to go to the...
To the Power Up Orchestra.
Yeah.
Now, we have a couple of minutes still. So why did you choose open source to be involved in?
To start,
Yeah,
yes.
to start.
It all started September last year, so almost 1 year ago. I have a personal admiration for Matt from WordPress Automatic.
Okay.
I think maybe because I started coding in the 90s or something, but WordPress was a huge thing in my life. And the way he grew the community and like all the value WordPress has is in its community of plugins. So it's pretty much it. But at the same time, I don't think many developers nowadays are in love with PHP. So we are trying to transform that and creating a new community, but for JavaScript or more modern stacks.
Perhaps. PHP is now just a joke to all developers, but it's pretty used.
Yeah, it's still.
A question? No? One more question? No? Okay. Thank you, Julia,
Thank you.
for having you here. And big applause. Bueno, ahora sí, llegamos ya al cierre. Estamos cerrando la... Pobre, quedó con el micrófono y el clicker, dame.